Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Brits and Yanks Talk Trek. This is what people are calling episode 5. This is a podcast for Trekkies, Trekkers, and absolutely everything in between. As you know by now, we are brought together from both sides of the pond by an obsession with a little game called Star Trek Fleet Command. We are not just going to be talking about Star Trek Fleet Command. If you followed the way that the pods have been going so far for the first 4 episodes, we are going to be talking about a general Star Trek topic as well. And I'm super excited for this week's Star Trek topic. We want to be sure, obviously, that everybody can get involved in, so please follow us on our Discord and suggest any options or suggest any topics that you would like the Brits and Yanks Talk Trek team to discuss. And I want to ask a little favour. I know we've only just started listening, but I do want to ask you a favour. I want you to share this podcast out, please, with 3 of your friends, whether that be at home because they also like Star Trek, in your alliance, if you're on STFC, at work or at school, anywhere. Somebody that you think would be interested in, obviously, what we do here on the podcast. Share it with 3 friends because we are really trying to grow the reach of this podcast, not just in STFC, but in the wider Star Trek community as well. And while you're there, remember to leave us, if you're happy with it, a review on iTunes. Let's just say who's here today. Obviously, I am here. We've got Mr. Perfection himself. We've got Silvers. How are you this evening, my friend?
I'm doing great, Luke. How are you doing?
Really good, thank you. We have got the Tribble Mother herself. We've got Minnie. Good evening.
Good evening.
And we've also got the king of the graphic. We've got Candy. How's things over there, my friend?
Things are going great today.
Marvellous. That's good. And we are going to start off, as we normally do, we're going to start off with our Star Trek topic of the pod. And we're going to talk one today. We're going to talk about general progression and how that has changed throughout the years. So just to give you a really brief bit of insight on this, we just want to talk about how moving through, when we talk progression, we're talking generally about ops levels. But what actually eats into those ops levels, so things like your officers, things like your research, and how that is impacted by your speed of progression, as it were. And I think it would be good just to sort of clarify where we've all been. So if we just quickly go around the room, I've been here since day 1. Minnie, when did you start playing?
18 months ago for me.
So we've got 18 months. Candy?
I started about 2 months after the game launched, and then took about a year or so off after I'd been playing the game for about a year and change, and then been back with it ever since.
So in terms of the progression on your account, we're probably talking about 4 years, aren't we? We're talking about 4 and a bit years worth of actual in-the-game gameplay. And yourself, Silvers?
51 months.
Oh, Christ, that's so precise.
4 years and 3 months. I was playing for a little bit before this, but really started up full time. I was Ops 15 or so, March of 2020, right when COVID started.
Trust Mr. Perfection, though, to come straight in there with the 51 months. We couldn't have expected anything else, could we? And we've all got totally different journeys and states of progression. I mean, if we talk about ops levels, I am a G6 player, and the other 3, you are G4 players. So talking about how we've progressed and how fast we've gone through these things, we've all got totally different sort of experiences, haven't we, in terms of obviously how we've gone through. And I think if I start with myself, I know that anybody listening to this that's just started the game or relatively new, been playing for 6 months, I can tell you now that I didn't get my Bortus, so my level 28 ship. Bearing in mind I started playing in the November of 2018. I didn't get my level 28 ship until the January of 2020. So it took me all of 2019 and obviously that little bit of 2018 to get from level 1 to level 28. Astronomical. Do you know what I mean? Wow. When you think about that now, that's how long it took me, and that was daily playing, that was completing all events, that was trying to get as much stuff out as I could in terms of uncommons. I wasn't taking it slow with anything. I was trying to progress as quickly as I physically could, and that's where I got to. And grinding out my Bortus was... God, it was painful. It was really, really tough, and it was good. I enjoyed the grind, but it took me so long. Now, the game has sped up quite considerably, and I think let's go from one extreme to the other. So from the oldest player in myself to the youngest player in terms of actual game time, go to Minnie. How long would you say it took you to get to, let's say, level 28?
28 took 2.5 weeks.
Oh my God.
Level like getting to level 14 took 4 days.
That blows my mind.
Jeez.
That absolutely blows my mind. And obviously, slightly more in the middle, Silvus, Candy. Candy, you go first. What about yourself? What about to get to that sort of reach? To get to what did you go for a Saladin? Did you go for a Bortus? How long do you reckon it took you in gameplay, months or years, for you to be able to get there? Bear in mind, you took a year off.
So the Saladin, I didn't get it until after I came back to the game. When I had stopped playing the game initially, I was maybe like a level ops 27, 28. The highest person on our server at the time was only ops 38. So having a jellyfish, like a baby jelly, was like you were the big kid on the block.
Yeah.
No one could touch you. But when I came back, it didn't take too very long, maybe about a month or two after getting back into the groove of it, to get my Saladin and keep working from there.
And this is a whole nother topic, but when you came back, if you can remember back that far, how did the game feel having taken that 1 year hiatus from playing, in terms of the acquisition of what uncommon materials, the acquisition of latinum to be able to do research and general resources for progression? How did the game feel after you'd taken that time out of the game?
The basic materials themselves actually weren't that hard to kind of begin to acquire at that point. The hardest part for me when I came back was the Borgarch had just got done being introduced, and the Outlaw Exchange had just finished as well. So I had to grind my way to get my first Stella. Like, I didn't get the free unlock that everyone got during that arc. That was probably the most painful part, was actually acquiring a Stella and then just trudging to get any and everything to try and upgrade my Stella.
Yeah, I mean, because remember this, we're talking about a time in the game when you had your dailies, yes, you had events, you had the Vidar, you had the Stella, you had the Franklin. That was basically it, wasn't it, in terms of loops? I mean, nothing like what the game looks like now. Maybe that is how it looks at 28 still, but nothing like what the game looks like now. What about yourself, Silvus, in terms of that early stage progression up to sort of 28? Have you got any idea how long that took you?
I started at maybe Ops 15 or so in March of 2020. I'd say maybe 5 or 6 months to get to Ops 28 to build my Saladin. Somewhere in that range.
So, I mean, and that's showing quite a big disparity, because sort of you missed, in essence, that first. I was probably a 28 when you started. I think that's probably about accurate. I was ballpark and Ops 28 when you started. And just to show the difference in the speed of progression, even in that first year. But then let's talk about the last 2 or 3 years, the acceleration. Oh my God, we need to think that you got to 28 in a month, 6 weeks, even if you were taking it maybe a little bit slower. Coming from my perspective, that just sounds absolutely insane. But I think what this does is this could really lull you into a sense of false security with, yes, I'm an Ops 28 player, but what am I when I actually look under the hood of this? What am I when I actually lift the bonnet, take a look at the engine? What is the actual progress of things like officers, research, etc.? Because research, I think, is a really undervalued one when you think about time in the game. Because yes, you can speed a lot of these things up, but most people will do 1 to 2 researches a day, maybe. Let's talk about an average. If you were to say how many researches you do a day, Silvus, what would you say would be an average number of researches, just so I can illustrate a point?
Maybe 2 to 3. For me, it's like I'll maybe do 1 research a day for a week, and then there'll be like a day in the week where I do like 20 researches. So it does vary.
It does vary, and of course that's very dependent on events. It's very dependent on obviously what resources you've got, or obviously what you're working towards, etc., etc. Of course it does. But if we average and said a couple of researches a day that you're going to be doing, you're not necessarily, if you're going to have only 6 weeks. God, how many days have you got there? 45 days, maybe 100 researches. You then swap that for somebody that's got a year to do that Ops 0 to Ops 28, similar to what we had, ballpark. That's 365 days at 2 or 3 researches. That's 1,000 plus researches.
And keep in mind that over time, as the game has progressed, they've added more research. So not only have you done less research because it took you less time to get up to that level, but there's just so much more research that someone of that ops level could have done.
I think what's important to remember is now you cannot do your dailies without doing 3 researches up until a certain level.
Do you know
It's
what?
only up until you get to, I think, your Franklin, when your swarms come in, that drops down to 2 researches. And then when you get your faction, it drops down to 1 research just for your dailies alone.
Oh, see, I forgot that even happened. Obviously, it's been 1 research for me for so long now. 1 research, 1 building, that ticks that daily box. There is a period when you're in G5 where you need 2 researches again. So anybody that's in the G4 region, that is something that you've got to look forward to, that there is a period where 2 researches are needed to complete that daily again. But I forgot that at the early stages, you are right. I mean, they even had dailies, if I recall, very, very early doors. I've seen it on people that have started again with their accounts, where one of the dailies was actually increasing your ops level, obviously because they want you to be pushing forward in those early stages, which I think's right. Yep. I don't think you need to be staying super early. Sorry, Silvers, go on.
I was just agreeing with you, and one thing I would like to bring up is one of those ways that the game has sped up so much is the addition of field training at those lower ops levels.
Of course, yeah. Talk to us about field training. What do you think that's done for the early stage progression?
So field training is a lower level way of teaching new players what is important in the game and kind of what you should be doing. The initial stages are officers, ships, and then there's a couple others, and they give you Moreau and pike shards. So completing those field trainings helps you start to unlock the premier hostile grinding crew in the game up until the early 40s, and you start to get some experience into, okay, I really need to focus on my officers. I need to complete these researches. I should be upgrading my ships. And it's broken for some people that transfer servers, but it really is a good way of explaining to the average player what you should be doing in this game.
Indeed. And just to reiterate a point there, obviously Silvers may not have clocked it, but they did fix field training a number of months ago now, talking in June of 2024. They did fix field training for a lot of those players, and it is remediable now with a ticket. If you have got any issues, they can sort it, but they did go back and fix a hell of a lot of accounts, even if you transferred servers. So yeah, I mean, the first 4 ships, officers, station and combat, they're the 4 field trainings that you start with. And when Pike was introduced, because Pike is not a day 1 officer, Pike was probably introduced 3 to 6 months after launch. When Pike was introduced, he changed the meta, the most efficient tactics available. He changed that meta for actually killing hostiles for the lower players to be that without him, basically, progression was really tough, or it took you multiple runs using some of the older crews with people like Cadet Ahura. Obviously, of course, you still had Chen and Talan, but Chen and Talan are not half as effective as what they are when you incorporate the Pike Moreau element into it as well. So it's a really big section of the game. And officers, coming back to that, I mean, we've talked about researches and how speeding through ops levels is going to put you naturally behind on researches just because of the time that you actually spend updating them and doing your daily rewards. But officers as well, officer progression, you going through your daily mini events, going through your dailies and pulling, even at the early stages, the standard recruits to get some of those key officers like Chen and Talan, and even your premiums, obviously your ultras, the more months that you spend getting those and acquiring them is going to massively improve your officer roster. And I mean, Mini, I would be very, very interested to know sort of how many officers at your level do you not have unlocked that are, say, of an epic variety? How many epic officers do you not have unlocked? I think you're an ops 43. And obviously, just the reason I'm asking this again is to illustrate another point, is that I have very rarely gone through the game without having every epic officer unlocked since about ops 35 to 40, because obviously I've been playing since day 1. I've been doing the acquisitions, I've been doing the auctions, I've been here when every single officer has been launched into the game, so where the additional shards are provided. And then obviously after that, you generally go down to RNG sourcing. So my officer roster would look very different, and it will do because I'm an Ops 60 plus player. But my officer roster would look very different to somebody like you that's been in the game for 18 months and not had the advantage of being involved in arcs where officers are launched. I mean, what does your officer roster look like out of interest?
So just having a quick look at it here, I mean, I don't have Jailer, which is so annoying. I don't have any of the pick Riker, pick Worf, pick Admiral Picard, and none of the strike team, and I'm really lacking on the Borg. But otherwise, I've been okay, and they are making it easier. Now we've got Section 31, and now we have the Borg event.
Mm-hmm.
But 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 21, 22, 24 epic officers. TOS Spock is the only TOS one I don't have unlocked.
I'm actually really
But
glad that you brought
everything
that up, Lou, because that was something that I was going to mention. Because I have seen Minnie's account when it comes in terms of officers, and I have noticed that there's just so many officers that she doesn't have unlocked, being newer to the game than a lot of us that have been here for a long time. Whereas you and I, and possibly Candy too, we have most of the officers that are available unlocked.
It is. And it's a huge thing. I mean, research and officers are the key components of this game. You may think it's ships, it is for certain loops, and obviously your ships are the things that go out there and get it done. But the crux of how good those ships actually are comes down to how's your research and what officers are you using. They are the absolute backbone of this game in terms of solid progression and in terms of solid performance for your ships. I think it's a really big thing. But obviously, I just want to sort of close this topic off, I suppose, as it were, and just sort of say, what do we think about progression? Do we think it's too fast? Do we think it needs to slow down? Obviously, we know, anybody that's listened to any of my content, I am not a fan of camping. I'm not a fan of sticking at an ops level for 6 months or something like that while you get caught up. I'm not a huge fan of that, but I do believe in strategic stopping points where you sit there for a couple of months, you have a list, you have a defined number of parameters that you want to go through, that you want to tick off before you look at moving on to the next ops level. And my general rule of thumb to this, before we go around the team and say obviously what they think, is ship levels. So when I talk about this, I mean, what level do you get your next level of faction ship? That's always where I like to sit, providing don't go there if you can't do your dailies in between the two. Of course, make sure you're ready to do your dailies before you go up any ops level. That's a huge factor. But so, for example, if we're talking about the 40s, then 42 is a good place to stop. Get your 42 ship, work on that, make sure it's right, and then push straight through to 46. Once you've been 46, push straight through to 50. Once you're happy at 50, then go through to 53. That sort of progression, move through your faction ships as your strategic stopping points. Get your next ship, because that's the big thing that's going to help you be able to progress. It is, but use that time in between to really focus on officers and research, and never look a gift officer shard in the mouth. If you see any officer shards up for grabs, even if it's only for transport or patterns, grab it. You never know when you're going to want to use those in an event, or you never know when they're going to throw an officer in there that you just want to be able to get to max instantly straight away. So that's my general take on progression. That's my general strategy for progression. We'll quickly work around and see what everybody else's opinions are. We'll start off with you, Silvus. What is your general strategy for progression? What do you consider before you move up an ops level?
I consider some of the same things that you do, making sure that I can do my dailies, making sure that I have the materials ready for the next ship. You asked the question earlier, and I do want to answer it. I do think that progression is a little bit too fast in the early game. I think once you reach the mid 30s to 40s area, then it's at a good pace. But I do think early game up to Ops 34 is pretty fast. It's not allowing players to get the ships that they need, get the officers that they need, get the research done that they should be doing. What I try to focus on when I'm looking at upgrading ops is making sure that I've got most of the research done for my ops level, making sure I've got the credits required for the next ship, if there's a ship at the next level, and then just looking forward to what I can expect from the next ops level, and making sure that I have as much of the requirements for that goal as I can done.
Agreed. And what I don't want anybody to do, I don't want anybody to use Scopely's method of progression to determine how they move through the game. Now, we've talked about this on streams, we've talked about this as a team. There are points in the game where lots of things start to unlock. We did a stream on Twitch a few weeks ago now where we looked at everything that happens, the loops that an Ops 40 needs to be involved in. And so much of the game now from about 9 months ago is basically geared for you have to be 40 plus to be able to play. Let's look at the Mirror universe. Let's look at Silence. Let's look at the Mona Veen. They are 40 plus content, and they started to eke this in even as early as Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine, the Defiant, the Solo Armadas and things. Yes, you could start doing them at 35. But really, you couldn't do the rares and start getting involved in the juicy parts of the loop until you got up to 40. And even sourcing the Defiant between 35 and 40 was an absolute pain. And don't just progress to get to that next step of when there's lots to do, because if you've got so much backfill to do, if you move up to Ops 41, 42, or as I sort of suggest, and you haven't got caught up on everything that you needed to be doing at 34, 35 with things like the Voyager, the Talios, the Defiant even, to be able to do it, or your level 34 ship to carry you through to 42, you're going to put yourself in a world of pain where there is just so much to do and so little time for you to actually be able to do it. And I think that's a really key component to when you're planning your progression strategy. Minnie, what about yourself? What's your thoughts on general progression and the topics that I've mentioned?
I think you are pushed too quickly, too soon. I think they're missing an opportunity by not putting a ship's component in the daily. I just want to scratch back onto the research. You need to remember that before Ops 30, or even 35, really, you've only got the four main ones. There's no Bajoran, there's no um, Section 31, there's no X-Borg faction. So you've only got the main researches across the top up until away teams. It's only when you open your Stellar that you then get your Stellar research.
It's a fair point.
Which we all know you can't do really until you've scrapped your first Stellar. So I think they push you too fast. I think they domination events, domination on BPs, domination before incursions, keeping up with your dailies just to get your shields or just because you got OCD. I think it bottlenecks you into you've progressed too fast. You get to 35, you've burnt out because you've not kept up. And just one more point, I want to know why you can unlock tier 9 of the Frankie, but can't get the Frankie A until 35. Just throwing that out there.
Probably because you don't need it until after 35, because obviously the highest level swarms are, if I remember rightly, level 35. So that's why at 35, when you start moving up to the next level of swarm, which I think the earliest one's 37, I don't think there's a 36 from memory. Obviously that's when you start needing the Franklin A to be able to kill them. But the Franklin is a loop that was massively killed, and like I say again, we could maybe go into a quality of life section. We could maybe have that as another topic of the pod of top quality of life improvements, things like the Franklin A converted to sort of X-Borg and how that's affected it with the freebooters. That's probably a whole nother topic in itself. I agree, but that's maybe potentially why that is. And finally, Candy, general last thoughts.
The attainment of officers, kind of as you go up further in ops levels. I mean, there should be kind of like a follow-up like path for those who are coming up through the ops to be able to get those newer, not necessarily the newest, but maybe like 2 or 3 arcs old officers, be able to have a path to acquire those over time versus having to either use the officer store to try and just play the numbers there. But for progressing up to the next ops level, I mean, I always like to make sure that I have my research handled. Like if it gets to a point where I'm not able to do a lot of new researches, or if resources start to kind of get to a point where I'm needing to go to that next point to attain the higher level of resources. If it's going to be, if it's more, I get to a point where I'm having to get 5-star materials now. I know that's at a point where I know I need to progress further. My main hurdle has been able to source credits a lot faster than a lot of my other cohorts seem to be able to get them a lot quicker to get that next kind of like progressive level ship.
Faction credits are you talking about more specifically?
Yes, sorry. But getting those faction credits to get that next tier of ship to really kind of be ready for the next ops level.
I agree. And like I said, I think we've all got very similar ideas and very similar things that we look for before we actually start to progress. And I think the whole point of this conversation was don't push yourself too fast, but then find that balance of don't sit and wait too far behind either. And it's about striking that balance between speed and between making sure that you're strong enough to be able to do what you need to do. And I think, this is the final thing that I wanted to just add on this before we move on. I think there's an argument, for newer servers. So when a brand new server gets launched into the game, why don't they, in month 3 or 4 of that server being there, why don't they rerun the Borg arc for them? Do you know what I mean? When they're all going to be able to go out there and get a Vidaris, why don't they rerun the Franklin arc from 2019? Why don't they rerun the Stellar arc in month 3 of that? People, if 6 months is a time where you can get to 28-30, why don't they rerun some of these older arcs on these servers rather than have a 2-month-old server and then we launch the mirror universe and go, haha, too bad, so sad. You're locked at 39. You can't even do it.
I'm guessing it's engineering is the reason for that, or just laziness. But I'll assume it's engineering.
We'll assume it's engineering. But I think it would be a really good way to make sure that people do understand the loops by playing it for 2 or 3 months while we're playing about in the mirror universe. A server that's ops locked to level 39, they could be rerunning the Borg arc, they could be rerunning the Stellar arc or something like that to give them some meaningful progression during that period rather than having to just go out and do a generic hostile hunt every day. Just a thought I've heard a couple of other people mention it in the past. Don't know if they'll ever do it, but I think it was something worth talking about. And anything else from anybody in relation to general progression? Anything that anybody else wants to add?
I do have one.
Go.
If you are able to join our Discord, you can go to the charts index, find the ops progression sheet. That can be a very useful resource in terms of talking about when you should move up, and you can even see comments from other STFC content creators and what they've said about how to and when you should move up, and you can even see everything that happens when you move up, what new ships you get, what new loops you unlock, and big shout out to Jules Verne and Blue Mandalorian for putting that together for the community.
Great reference. Totally agree. You've even got my comments on there, so you can go and listen to everything that I have to say on there. Absolutely fantastic. And just like that, we are going to pivot into one of my favorite sections of the pod. We're going to pivot into Freedom and Reason. Amazing. And today's topic is tea and coffee. Strange topic you may be thinking about, but they are very, very different, both sides of the pond. Even what tea even means, how you consume tea, how you even produce a nice cup of tea differs from one side of the pond to the other. So, Candy, when I say to you tea, what jumps out at you? What are you thinking of when I say tea?
Are you sick? Are you feeling under the weather, or if it's the summertime, like you making some sun brewed iced tea?
Hang on. Go back. Sun what? Do that again.
Somewhat.
Sun brewed.
Yeah, so we have a sun brewed iced tea. So like you get usually it's you get it in your pre-made tea bags, and you get a giant 2.5-3 gallon pitcher, or a 5 or 6 liter container.
Nice conversion.
Freedom unit.
And you put like 4 or 5 tea bags into the container, fill it all the way up to the top with water, and you stick it out on the front porch for a day, 2 days, and just let it brew in the sun.
Oh my God.
This is worse than a microwave for coffee. Oh, Lord. Oh, I need to lie down.
Just you carry on. I'm
just-
going to go
just-
find a bucket. You carry on.
Good Lord.
Oh, we haven't even added the sugar to it. If you wanted to make it turn it into sweet tea.
Bloody hell. Oh my word.
Nice start, Candy. Nice
Oh
start.
my God. Right. Okay. Right. Minnie.
Can I move into December 16th, 1773, when we threw all that tea into the Boston Harbor?
You can. Go on. Tell us that story.
So December 16th, 1773 is the date of the Boston Tea Party. It's one of the big movements that started the Revolutionary War, and we just threw hundreds of pounds of tea into the Boston Harbor.
Did people drink it?
I doubt it.
What was the point of that then?
I was just a revolt. Get rid of your tea.
Ah, right. So there wasn't trying to make a huge cup of tea for everybody to actually go.
Oh,
and
no. Revolting against the tea tax.
Oh, my
Because you were
word.
taxing tea.
Right. Now,
The Boston
that
Tea
was-
Party.
that was the freedom element. Let's have a little bit of reason now on the podcast. Minnie,
Oof.
tell me what a cup of tea is. Tell me what a cup of tea is,
Right.
Minnie.
A good cup of tea starts with the granny, okay? You'll go round to granny's, there'll be a teapot. It will have been stewing for 3.5 days, maybe. She'll top it up with some hot water. You'll get your cup of tea, your splash of milk, and your sugar. That's how it starts as a child. Your first introduction is tea is with the grandparents. And then as an adult, you go out and you buy your own tea in a tea bag. You take it home. You use a kettle to make hot water, not the sun. And then you pop your tea bag in, fill up the cup with your hot boiled water out of the kettle, swish your tea bag around a bit, drain your tea bag, splash of milk, bit of sugar. That's a cup of tea, people. End of.
See, I would have thought that you would have preferred the sun to the microwave.
I do prefer the sun to the microwave, and I'm going to come on to that in a second because there is actually an age-old debacle. There's an age-old issue with making a cup of tea as to which order you actually add the ingredients to make a correct cup of tea. Now, when
I just told you the
No,
correct order.
okay,
No.
No,
boy.
no.
See, okay. See,
No,
even the Brits
no,
can't agree on
No,
the
we
correct
can't.
order of making tea.
right, here we go. So, when I was young, growing up, my mother taught me how to make tea. She did. She taught me how to make tea. And she said that you do exactly what Minnie said. Tea bag in, boiled water, get the tea bag out, strain it, blah, 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 let it mash, a little bit of milk, off you go. Sugar if you wish. That's an optional extra. When I got older and I got with my current good lady, she didn't make it like that. She put the milk in first. So she put the tea bag in the cup. She put milk in the cup. And then she added the boiling water and she made it that way. And I said to her, what on earth are you doing? That is not how you make a cup of tea. She gave me it and I said, this is disgusting. That was a lie. That was a lie. Because I have made tea the same ever since. And I am now renowned for my cups of tea. I make the best cups of tea out of everybody that I know. I don't know how I do it. They are exceptional. And what I've found is if you do it milk first, Minnie, and just try it, you don't get them scummy, bubbly bubbles on the top that you get sometimes in tea when you add the milk second. Don't know how it does it. Don't know why it does it. But the correct way, and this is what I'm going to advocate, the correct way now to make tea is actually to put the milk in first. Now, I was a milk in last kind of guy. I was. Putting the milk in first is an absolute revolution. But before we get to the point of talking about milk, because Minnie disagrees with me, but I'm going to ask you to try it and then feed back to us on a future podcast, Minnie. Feedback to us, just try it again for me, because I was the same as you, but I am a convert. I'm a convert to a milking first. But what I want to talk about is tea should be hot. When I say hot, I don't mean warmed by the big power station in the sky on a porch for 6 months. I don't mean that, because that's ridiculous.
Summer doesn't even last for 6 months.
Okay, I'll give you that, correct. But I mean, it needs to be hot. And how you heat the water, it was pretty straightforward to me. Everybody has a kettle. That's how you boil the water. You boil that water for tea.
Oh, no.
You have a kettle to boil it.
No.
Or you can use a saucepan to boil the water. Happy with that. That don't really matter to me. You can even boil the water in a kettle on the stove. I mean, they all work for me. But everybody has a kettle. And that was just a fact of life for me growing
Americans
up.
don't have kettles.
And that's my point. That blew my mind. Repeat that, Silvus. Explain to me why. How on earth do you function in life?
Americans don't have kettles. We have large pots, so we could heat up our water on the stove. Like if we're making pasta, we heat it up on the stove.
Mm-hmm.
So that same kind of process. That's similar to a kettle in some ways. But you can just as easily put your plastic pitcher in the microwave for 2 minutes.
God.
Oh,
God. Where's that bucket? It won't even be. That's just not. It'll taste funny. It will not taste correct to do it that way. Minnie, was you disagreeing with me on the use of a kettle earlier? Was you trying to get in there?
No, I knew where you were going. I knew where you were going with this. You were going to bring the microwave up. It's wrong. It's
microwaving water for tea. It's just wrong. It's just ridiculous. Get into the 21st century. Buy a kettle. Do you know what I mean? It's not. They're like £3 from Asda or Walmart to you people across the pond. It's like £3 for a kettle to boil it. Doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be a soft, swazzy one that has 4 different temperature settings. Mine has that, actually. I have one for chai tea. I have a setting for chai tea on my kettle. It's a very posh kettle. But you don't need that. Don't need any of that. I just got it because it matched my toaster and I liked it. That was the whole reason that we got it. But everybody should have a kettle. If you haven't got a kettle, you can't make a proper cup of tea, which is evident by the fact that you leave it out in the sun for 6 years. Do you know what I mean? That's evident that you don't know how to make tea. Oh, anybody got anything else on tea before we move on to coffee? Because coffee is a whole nother subject.
Have you ever tried iced tea?
So I have tried.
There we go.
So iced tea, yes, I have. There is a branded iced tea in this country. I had one today. I actually find it one of the most refreshing beverages when you need to quench your thirst ever. But again, I'm a huge tea drinker. So yes, I do like iced tea, but we buy it in 500ml bottles, half a litre. God knows what that is in however you measure it, pounds, kilometres, whatever, however you measure liquid over there. However
Kilometers.
however you decide to do it. But yeah, you can buy it here. I like iced tea. It's a great thirst quencher. So yes, I do like iced tea.
Iced tea is a very southern drink, Southern American drink. What about Arnold Palmer's?
Okay, you're going to have to translate that from Yank to Brit.
Candy, you take this one.
So an Arnold Palmer is you essentially take your sun-brewed tea and you add whatever ratio you want to add to it, you add lemonade to it.
It's usually 50-50.
Oh my
typically.
word. What on
So it's lemonade and iced tea.
It could be worse. They could be adding milk. It could be worse.
Or there's even a third member to that trifecta.
Go on.
If you're an adult, I take the Arnold Palmer one step further, and I add my favorite kind of. Usually, it's either vodka or some kind of a clear type liquor, and I turn it into what's called a John Daly.
Okay.
So do you know who? Are you familiar with John Daly?
I know Tom Daly. He's a diver.
John Daly is another professional golfer who was known for, when he was on the tour, he was always kind of like one of the more cruder type golf players. He'd be smoking when he was doing his rounds of golf. Even on TV, he would be drinking and sometimes belligerently drunk during televised coverages of golf tournaments. So he kind of became a cult. He attained a cult following for that kind of person on the golf tour, and so
Right.
the name for a spiked variation of a Arnold Palmer became the John Daly.
What an interesting fact. I really like that. I mean, I think we can just safely say that tea means two completely different things when we're talking about beverages across each side of the body. Absolutely mental. I mean, we even
it's not even always a beverage in the UK.
That's exactly my next point. I mean, I would say now, Minnie, you're northern. You're up here with me. What would you call your base 3 meals of the day?
Breakfast, dinner, tea.
Correct. So, cha-ching. So I would also do that. Breakfast, dinner, tea. Sometimes, if I'm feeling a little bit posh, I'll change it to breakfast, lunch, and tea. And then if you have something later on, we call that supper. And but tea is a very northern thing because breakfast, lunch, and dinner is used probably more in the south of the UK. And obviously, over at your side, what would you call your 3 meals, Silvers?
Breakfast, lunch, and then it, depending on where you are and whose family you're in, it's either dinner or supper. It's used very exchangingly.
Oh, so you would have supper at like 5 or 6 o'clock on an evening. Some families would call that. Oh, right.
Yeah, dinner or supper. It means the same thing in the United States.
Oh, I never knew that. Supper is like a before bed snack, really, for us, or something that you're feeling a bit peckish before you, maybe half an hour or so before you go to bed. That's supper for us. And we might have like crumpets or something like that. That's a supper, or a bowl of cereals or something like that. I know that's a breakfast item. I know that. But I know lots of people that have cereals for supper over here. So, no, craziness. Lastly, I'm going to do this one quickly. Coffee. You cannot make coffee. You literally find one small little coffee bean. You get a cheese grater. You grate 3 shards into 6 gallons of water. Casually stir it together. And I'm talking about lukewarm water as well, not hot water.
That is not
and have
even close to true.
Brown water. It tastes of nothing. It's rubbish. If you had a coffee over here as we have it, which is a heaped teaspoon in a mug, pour boiling water from the mini.
Kettle?
Yes, not from the fridge or anywhere else that you want to get it from. Not from the microwave. Not from the porch. Not from the porch. None of that crap. Don't need any of that. From the kettle, you pour it onto a heaped teaspoon, sometimes a teaspoon and a half if you need a little bit of energy, or it's the first one in the morning, and you have a steaming mug of nice, brown, strong coffee. I like it black. Don't clip that. However, you can have it white, you can have it with milk, you can have it with cream. Obviously, there's lattes, there's flat whites, there's all those posh types of coffee. But I was talking about black coffee in general that you would just add milk or cream to if you're feeling a little bit posh. Tell me I'm wrong, Silvers.
Well, you can also add a little bit of salt to take away the bitterness, but
What the hell?
Hang on, stop now.
What's wrong with you people?
Stop now. That's got to be a joke. That's got to be a joke.
No, not at all. It's actually a chemistry fact. You can add just a pinch of salt, and it removes the bitterness in the coffee.
You know what else removes the bitterness? Sugar.
Yeah.
Sugar does. It's a sweet honey. That also removes the bitterness.
If you
Okay,
find
but you don't
your
actually
coffee
taste.
bitter,
You don't actually taste the salt. It's not like it tastes salty. Like I said, it's just a pinch, and it's
right.
It's
I can
just
try this right now.
It's just
the
a
second
chemical.
half of this streak, this pod could go very badly.
He's trying it right now.
Very badly.
But
It's just a pinch.
But I do just find that your coffee is much weaker than what we have over here. And that's probably down to palate. It's probably down to taste. It's probably down to years and years doing it. And I also find that one thing I do like about coffee in America is that you make a hell of a lot of it. We make a cup at a time, whereas you make like 16 kilometers at a time worth of it, don't you?
The standard is 12 cups. If you buy like a standard coffee maker that would just make black coffee, it would be 12 cups of coffee.
And how many coffees would you have, say, in a morning?
A few cups, maybe,
Yeah.
depending on who you are. I don't drink coffee, so
No.
it's hard for me to comment. But I know that your standard, it's more like a kettle. Like we almost do coffee correctly, whereas like it's not in the microwave. There's like an actual.
You add salt. That's
it's
not correct.
You're not adding like
a
cup of salt.
Yeah.
The only time you bring a microwave into the mix is when you've let your coffee go cold and you need to warm it up.
Pour it out, get a new one.
Oh,
Honestly,
okay,
throw it in the microwave.
Minnie, straight up, look it up. Look it up. It's absolutely
I'm
true.
trying it. I'm not looking it up. I'm trying it. I am making a coffee right now.
Just you can't add that much. Like you don't add a teaspoon. It's much less than that.
I understand
there is
the
a
concept.
chemical reason.
I understand the concept of what you're trying to say. If I'm being 100% honest, I get that the salt takes away the bit of bitterness. I think I understand where that goes, but I think we can safely say that tea, coffee, whether that be a beverage in terms of tea and coffee, it's totally different at both sides.
Do you have iced coffee in the UK?
We do.
Is that a thing?
It normally comes in a can. We don't know. I don't know many people that make it at home. It probably is a done thing. Yeah, like Starbucks and Costa and places like that. Obviously, other coffee outlets are available, but there are lots and lots of places that do iced coffees. Not a fan myself. Now, if I make a coffee and I say go on a work call and I leave it there for 20 minutes and it goes cold, I will still drink it because I like coffee that's gone cold. I would never think of putting it back in the microwave. I quite like my coffee when it's gone cold. But we will leave that at that and say that we've got ridiculous differences culturally across both sides of the pond in relation to tea and coffee. And I thought that was a fantastic conversation. We are now going to move on to our Star Trek topic of the pod. Now, I'm really excited for this one. I'm really looking forward to it. And the topic today for Star Trek, not STFC, Star Trek, is concepts for what the next Star Trek movie could be. Now, I've tasked the panel with thinking outside the box, use some blue sky thinking, think about anything. You can will anything into existence, take any series, take any movie and expand on it and come up with an idea for what you would like the next Star Trek movie to be. What would be the thing that if you saw an advertisement for it, oh my God, you'll be booking a ticket for the first night, the second night, the third night, the fourth night, because you want to see it because the concept sounds amazing. And we're going to start with you, Candy, because I think you're going to have a really good one. What is your concept for the next Star Trek movie and how does that play out?
My concept would actually take place just before the Picard series, and it would essentially go about Picard's attempts to help the Romulan people evacuate from Romulus when their sun was going supernova, and the events that kind of led up to the android society like going completely bonkers and taking out the Utopia shipyards and the shipyards on Mars.
Yeah,
essentially, like I think that would be a really cool like storyline to really kind of expand on that they only touched on in the very beginning of the series.
I agree, because we sort of went from androids and things like that. They were just absolutely the next best thing. They were the best thing since sliced bread. They were used to do really good things, and then Picard starts and they're banned from doing anything. Do you know what I mean? They're not allowed to do anything. They're the most despised thing ever. There's a thing to try and absolutely eliminate them from the face of the existence. It's changed too quick. So I think you found a really good plot there in the middle that you would make a really good film out of. I mean, who would you like to see in that? Or would you like to see that from the perspective of a certain particular crew or a particular person? Do you know what I mean? Who do you think would be your front runner in that sort of a film?
I would really like I would still really like to be from Picard's point of view, only from the standpoint of I would really like to see his mental thought process and how he got to the point where he decided to actually quit Starfleet and decide to retire from there. Like, I want to see like how bad did it actually have to get for him to decide like, all right, this is no longer the Starfleet that I've given my many years of service to. I'm done.
Yeah,
like, I would really like to know how it got to that point.
Amazing, because again, exactly what I've just said before, we've gone from Nemesis, the final bit of Picard before Picard, obviously where he was still in love with Starfleet, he was still a dedicated Starfleet officer, to then he's not in Starfleet, he's helping the Romulans. Do you know what I mean? It was, there's a huge gap there, isn't there, to fill, and I think that's a fantastic idea, and I would love to see that, wouldn't you, Silvers?
I think it would be a great topic idea. Yeah.
It'd be superb. And what's your idea, Silvers? What would your concept for the next Star Trek movie be?
So I've actually got two ideas. One that's more specific and one that's more broad. So my more specific one is I would love to see another Lower Decks crossover. We saw one in season 2 of Stranger Worlds where Boimler and Mariner crossed over. We got to see their live action versions in the real world of the Stranger Worlds cast, and I thought that was a great episode. I'd love to see something similar to that for another crew, perhaps. But I loved that Lower Decks crossover that we saw in Stranger Worlds, and even if it's like the entire Cerritos is transported to some other timeline where they're in real live action characters, whether it's Discovery or Picard, or they go back to Deep Space Nine or whatever. I just think that would be really interesting.
If you had to put a tick in a box then for where you think you'd like them to cross over to, and what sort of a plot line do you think that you'd get from it? Which box would you tick? Which series, or obviously which characters would you like the Lower Deckers to go back and meet?
Jonathan Frakes as Riker, I think, would be someone that they would love to see in like real flesh and blood, as opposed to just the character that is the captain of the Titan in their time. So possibly during the time of TNG, when he's just the commander of the Enterprise D, not the captain of the Titan. So going back in time a little bit from their perspective, potentially. I would also love to see more of like the Time Travel Authority, or whatever it's called in the 29th century, when they figure out time travel.
The Department of Temporal Investigation, just them sort of people.
Yeah. It's getting involved with that kind of thing. That's also been on my mind of having that come out in a movie or series.
There isn't actually a boundary to that. There isn't a boundary to that, is there? Do you know what I mean? That is, you can go wherever, whenever, anytime and do anything. That is absolutely limitless as a concept. They could make 73 seasons of that and not run out of storylines and plots for that. Do you know what I mean? Of things that they could go back and change. I mean, they could even go back into ancient history of Earth, couldn't they? They could go back to when the apple fell on Newton's head if they really wanted to, and change the concept of how we think of gravity.
That's such a myth.
I know, and I knew you was going to say that. That's why I mentioned it. And I got a sigh. I got a silver sigh. I heard it really loud. I liked it. I needed that. But no, absolutely. I think that's an outstanding. I like both of them answers, and I would flock to the cinemas to go.
Oh, that was only one of my answers.
Oh, go on.
But I'll let you and Minnie.
Yeah, don't be doing it, because you might end up stealing it.
Come back to it.
Because nobody's stolen my idea.
I doubt it, but
no, because nobody's stolen my idea, I'm going to go next. Sorry, Minnie, if this was anything to do with you. I found that we had one character whose storyline abruptly ended at the end of the series, and we never knew anything about it after that. Nothing's ever really been mentioned apart from the odd one-liner here and there. And that's Cisco. Cisco, obviously, at the end, he went back with the Prophets. He went into the wormhole, as it were, into there. And we know nothing about what happened to one of the greatest fighting commanders Starfleet has ever seen. My argument to be probably one of the best captains that Starfleet has ever seen. He went off with the wormhole aliens, Prophets, whatever you want to call them, and we never saw him again. I would love to see what happened after that. I think they could make a whole movie about something that happens with Bajor, whether the Cardassians take try and take back over Terok Nor, whether there's another brand new alien race in the wormhole that Sisko tries to help these peace-loving people, but somebody infiltrates the wormhole and he has to go out and talk to Starfleet and find a ship and a crew and concepts to help fight this wormhole war. Do you know what I mean? There's like a war in there, and it brings a whole new layer to the weapons that they've got to develop, the ships they've got to develop to be able to cross over into their realms while they're in the wormhole. I think there's so many different things that they could do with it, but I think that the Sisko story arc for him as a character could be explored after the events of the end of Deep Space Nine. What do you think?
That's such a good topic.
Very good.
I love Cisco.
Me
It's
too.
incredible in Deep Space Nine. So that's a great topic.
And I think it was a bit unjust, really, that it ended with him wandering off into a wormhole and then nothing else ever really happened to him. I think that's open for a movie to close his arc loop, and I would like to see him not finish up there. I'd like to see him come back and spend the rest of his life with Jake. That's what I would like him to do as a father, as a Starfleet officer. I think that's what he is first and foremost. He was the emissary, the prophet second, and I think that would be a really good idea. Finally, but not at least, yourself, Minnie.
Okay, I'm going to go right back to the beginning. I really have thought about this. And I'm taking my influence from the Picard series, where we saw the Borg infiltrate humanity by putting the claws into the wires into the back of humanity and being able to control it. So I was thinking about that. And I want to go right back to the beginning, brand new cast, brand new crew, and have just be after the Enterprise, before the original series. Go Star Trek, go out, colonize a planet, start working with the technology they've got, and some slime just watching what's going on. And that slime becomes infected by the technology from Starfleet and creates the Borg. That's what I'd love to see.
So, like an origin story of where did this Borg race start? There must have been a first assimilation.
I thought the Borg race started in the Delta Quadrant. We saw that in Voyager.
But what started it? Do you know what I mean? We know it now as this thousands of ships, obviously, all the jumpy, what are the jumpy things called that they go through, the subspace conduits, all that sort of thing. We know them for this fantastically technological and advanced race. Are you thinking that you'd like to know a bit more about the origin story of the Borg? Where did the Borg start? How did they get on this path for seeking perfection and assimilating races?
Exactly. I think the goo would be like so advanced, but be staying in this goo form, but will assimilate everything around it on its planet and become captain of it. Not violent or anything like that. And then just the introduction of the carelessness of humanity, throwing away bits of tech here and there, and them assimilating the tech, and then therefore assimilating humanity, not understanding what's going on, moving out to the Delta Quadrant before they come back and kill their makers, maybe. I don't know. Just something like that. I think it's very, to me, that was where I wanted to go.
Yeah, I actually did think of this topic myself, and the only reason that I didn't go with it as my topic of choice was because I feel like the Borg has just been beat to death in Star Trek. You've seen it in just about every series and movie that has come out, and it's just, like I said, beat to death. You've seen it so many times.
I don't disagree. I mean, the Borg are strewn throughout, aren't they? But they are the ones that we love to hate. They are the race that if they're in an episode, you're not going to skip it. I mean, nobody would ever do a rewatch of TNG and skip Best of Both Worlds. Nobody's not watching that from start to finish. People are going to watch the Hugh episode. They're going to watch the Q episode, obviously, where Q sends them back, the first ever episode. There's just so many things, obviously, that the Borg are involved in. That section of Voyager was one of my favourite bits of Voyager, even though it annoyed me a bit that Voyager on its own could kill a Borg cube. There was a couple of lore issues there, weren't they? That itself could kill it when a whole fleet couldn't kill one Wolf 359. But anyway, we digress and move on to a separate point, obviously about story plots and things that don't really make sense. That could be another topic of the pod for the future, things that didn't really make sense when we're talking.
You should be writing these down.
I should be writing these down. I absolutely should. But no, absolutely. You said you had an honourable mention for Star Trek, Silvers. Do you want to throw that in the mix before we close off?
Yeah, I had another idea, kind of going back to the same time area of what Minnie's idea was. But as you know, I am an engineer. I'm a scientist. I love all this stuff. So in Enterprise, we got to see how some of the technology progressed, whether it was the warp drive or the shuttle pod transversing to the transporter and grappling hook, which was later replaced by the
tractor beam.
Oh, help me! Thank you, tractor beam. So, as an engineer, as a scientist nerd, I would love to see more of the technological advancement of some of the systems on these ships and like stations like Terok Nor, Deep Space Nine, that the crew takes for granted, like replicators, and like we saw the grappling hook in Enterprise that I mentioned. So some of that stuff, just seeing that technological advancement that is taken for granted in the other series that we've seen.
Yeah, exactly. Because even using Enterprise as another example for this, obviously the transporters were used for cargo only. It was only in Enterprise where they started getting used safely for humans, or there was approved
exactly
human use. So that was not necessarily the invention of the technology, but the advancement of the technology to actually make it a usable tool by life forms rather than just obviously cargo. So no, I agree. I think that would be really good. Very nerdy. Very nerdy, but we like that.
I'm a nerd. That's just a straight fact. But I really do think Enterprise did that aspect well. I mean, they're set 200 years before most of the other Trek, and I love how they tuned the technology back to where like the Warp 5 was basically the maximum, where you had grappling guns instead of the tractor beam. And like you said, the transporter was only used for cargo, and they had to use the shuttle pods instead. And I just loved
to invent Red Alert.
Yeah, and I loved seeing that technology growth and advancement. I would love to see more of that in a movie, perhaps, but that's likely not going to happen.
What did Malcolm want to call Red Alert? What did he want to call Red Alert? Combat readiness or something like that. He wanted to call it something really crap, didn't he, when he was coming up with Red Alert? I can't remember what he wanted to call it.
I just can't remember.
It was funny, though. Go on, Minnie.
I have a problem. This coffee tastes really nice.
Yes.
And on that note,
I'm sorry. Oh no.
Boom, science.
I am answering that.
Yeah.
On that note, this podcast is
next week. Can give you some feedback.
This podcast is available on all major podcast platforms. If you are leaving us on Apple, listening to us on Apple, please leave us a 6 out of 5 star review. That would be amazing. We will be reading reviews in future shows, so get your review in early so it's got a good chance of being read. Join our Discord. You can access all the tools created by Stewie Doo, who wasn't able to make it with us tonight, and obviously all the chats that are curated by Silvus as well. Thank you so much, guys, for everything you do for the community. Thank you so much. Check out our other channels, Twitch. You can see myself, It's Lube, and Minnie Mabel on there. Obviously YouTube as well. That's the same for me, It's Lube. You'll be able to access all of my STFC content that goes onto YouTube. Give us some feedback, obviously, on our Discord. Link to that is down in the episode description. So come and chat with us on there, suggest topics, ask us some questions, and get to know the whole rest of the crew. Check out our website, visit itslube.com. Itslube.com is the best place for you to access all of our information. You can get all of our content. You can check out our merch, which which Candy White makes for us. And you will be able to check that out. Pick yourself up a t-shirt, grab a mug, do something like that. And while you are there, please consider becoming a member of the podcast. I'm going to say a huge thank you to all of our members right now as we sign out. I'm going to say a huge thank you to Trek Diva, Deja, Antares, Minnie Mabel, and Sorella. Thank you so much for your ongoing support. It means the absolute world to me. And thank you so much. And remember, guys, everything is better with lube. Take care and have a wonderful evening. Until next time.
Goodbye.